So the release of Dr. Ratio has been a little wonky because he released on a day that I wasn't expecting him to, or at least I wasn't really tracking to. So that meant this guy got pushed back a little bit because I'm kind of a big dumb idiot. But I will say that since Dr. Ratio has been released, there has been a lot of really good strides on how to build him. And with myself and a couple content creators talking, I figured out a couple of ways to make him a great build. And obviously he's pretty dang broken because the screenshots that I've been seeing have him doing millions of damage to single targets, which is insane. But we're gonna talk about more of a casual build because I'm more of a casual builder myself. So today we're gonna be talking about how to ascend and build your Dr. Ratio in Honkai Star Rail. Now, of course, if you like the content, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button down below and hit that notification bell to be notified of when the next Honkai Star Rail video comes out. And of course, thank you all for the support that you've been giving me recently. We've been growing at an alarming rate, which is fantastic. Now, of course, also don't forget to check out gamersubs.gg, who are my sponsors for today. Get 10% off for, using code Tystra, and I think that you should because they make some really, really good products. But without any further delay, let's go ahead and get into today's video. As you can see, we have Dr. Ratio here on the screen. Dr. Ratio is of the Hunt path, so he's a single target DPS. And of course, he is imaginary element, which means, we have so many imaginary elements that are insane. Or imaginary element character. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. But let's go ahead and talk about how to first ascend your Dr. Ratio. First things first, you're gonna need these Thief's Instincts, these Usurper Schemes, and of course the Conqueror's Wills. Now, the reason why I put those together is that you're going to need to farm the enemies that are on Herta's space station and Yarilo 6, I believe it's correct. But you're gonna need 15 of these Thief's Instincts, you're gonna need 15 of the Usurper Schemes, and 15 of the Conqueror's Wills. Now, of course, remember rules of 3. 3 of the Instincts make a, what is it? I keep on messing this one up. Usurper Scheme, and 3 of the Schemes make a Conqueror's Will. And of course, you're also going to need 65 of these Suppressing Edicts, which is a Stagnant Shadow boss. Always go to your, guide, and you'll be able to actually see in game where to go. But you're going to need 65 of these, which means you're going to need to do 13 total runs because of you having 240 Trailblaze power. Now, that's about 8 runs a day. So you'll get it done in 2 days. So that's the least of your worries in that regard. Now, when we go to the trace material side, let's go ahead and talk about more of these Thief's Instincts and all that stuff. You're going to need 41 more of the Thief's Instincts, which brings you to a grand total of 56. You're going to need 56 more of the Usurper Schemes, which puts you at a 71 in total. And then for the Conqueror's Wills, you're going to need 58 more, which puts you at a 73 in total. So it's going to be a lot of overworld farming, but it's definitely worth the grind because of how strong he actually is. Now, let's go ahead and talk about his specific red calyx material here. The Arrow of the Beast Hunters, you're going to need 18 of those. You're going to need 69 of the Arrow of the Demon Slayers, and you're going to need 139 of the Arrow of the Star Chasers. Now, again, rules of 3. 3 of these Beast Hunters make a Demon Slayer, and 3 of the Demon Slayers make a Star Chaser. And this is a lot of grinding because calyxes, you could get a lot done. I believe it's 24 a day runs, and they don't drop a lot, unfortunately, so definitely take your time to get those all ready to go. Now, outside of those, you're gonna need 12 of these, the Past Evils of the Borehole Planet Disaster, which is the new Swarm King world boss. So sorry, I kind of spaced out there for a second. It is the new world boss that came out just recently, so make sure that you get those done. You're going to be able to fight him 3 times a week, and you get 3 drops. So 2 weeks, and you'll be able to get those done. So, and then of course, you're going to need 8 Tracks of Destiny, which we get these like candy. So it's worth the grind to get those all out. And between Ascension and Trace Materials, you're going to need 3.3 million credits, which is a lot. It's hard to grind credits in my personal opinion. So make sure to take the time to get those grinded up and ready to go. Now, of course, let's go ahead and talk about the actual skills and everything of Dr. Ratio here. First things first, the first skill, Intellectual Midwifery. That's the skill for a single target. Deals imaginary damage equal to 187.5% of Dr. Ratio's attack to a single target enemy, which is why you're going to want to scale on his attack in general in regards to building him up. But of course, when we talk about traces as well, let's talk about the bonus traces of these skills, right? So summation, when Dr. Ratio uses his skill for every debuff on the character, his crit rate increases by 2.5% and crit damage by 5%, and this effect can stack up to 6 times. So you could get a total of what? So 6 times 2 is 12, and then another 2.5, that's 14.5 crit rate, and then 30% crit damage, which is actually pretty dang good. And then you got Inference. When skill is used to attack an enemy target, there's a 100% base chance to reduce the attack target's effect resistance by 10% for 2 turns. So he works really, really well for debuffers as well to help them out. Of course, we go to the ultimate Syllogistics Paradox, or Syllogistic Paradox. Deals imaginary damage equal to 288% of Dr. Ratio's attack to a single target enemy and applies Wise Man's Folly. When Dr. Ratio's allies attack a target afflicted with Wise Man's Folly, Dr. Ratio launches his talent follow-up attack for 1 time against his target. Wise Man's Folly can be triggered up to 2 times and only affects the most recent target of Dr. Ratio's ultimate. This target count, or this trigger count, resets after Dr. Ratio's ultimate is used. So this is going towards literally just the attacked enemy, and I literally had a hard time finding this out because that's how the follow-up attack actually works for Dr. Ratio. However, usually when you use the ultimate, you want to use it on the boss, because if you use those follow-up attacks, it's going to do a lot of damage in the long run, so it's very, very worth it. Let's talk about the actual talent here. Cognito Ergo Sum, or is it Cogito? Cogito. When using a skill, Dr. Ratio has a 40% fixed chance of launching a follow-up attack against his target for 1 time, dealing imaginary damage equal to 337.5% of Dr. Ratio's attack, and each debuff for each debuff the target enemy has, sorry, I read too fast, the fixed chance of launching follow-up attacks increases by 20%. If the target enemy is defeated before the follow-up attack triggers, the follow-up attack will be directed at a single random enemy instead, which is really good. Followed by the trace deduction here, as you can see. When dealing damage to a target that has 3 or more debuffs, for each debuff the target has, the damage dealt by Dr. Ratio to this target increases by 10% up to a maximum of 50%, which is 5 debuffs. Very good. You want to make sure that you're going up in as much damage as you can with Dr. Ratio, because he is absolutely bonkers. Now, Mold of Idolatry, which is his technique, after using the technique, causes a dimension that taunts nearby enemies, lasting for 10 seconds. After entering battle with enemies in this dimension, there is a 100% base chance to reduce each single enemy target's speed by 15% for 2 turns. Only 1 dimension created by allies can exist at each time. So, the reason why this is important is because you want to make sure that you're capitalizing on all your attacks going first. So if you reduce that speed, you're able to attack first every single time. Excuse me, sorry. I've been dealing with a stuffy nose lately and it's annoying. So let's go ahead and talk about light cones, because light cones, there is a significant amount that you could actually use. First things first, Baptism of Pure Thought, which is his specific light cone and probably his best one, right? So increases the wearer's crit damage by 20% for every, get out of here, what are you doing? For every debuff of the enemy target, the wearer's crit damage dealt against his target additionally increases by 8%, stacking up to 3 times, which means that you're going to be getting a 24% buff. When using an ultimate to attack the enemy target, the wearer receives the Disputation effect, which increases damage dealt by 36% and enables the follow-up attacks to ignore 24% of the target's defense, which is perfect because, again, he's going to be a follow-up attacker, so perfect. But of course, if you don't have that and you have another actual hunt light cone that you summon for, if you summon for Topaz, you have this one, the Worrisome Blissful. Increases the wearer's crit rate by 18% and their follow-up damage attack damage by 30%. After the wearer uses a follow-up attack, apply the Tama state to the target, stacking up to 2 stacks. When allies hit enemy targets under the tame state, I don't know why I said Tama, it's tame. Every tame stack increases the crit damage dealt by 12%, which is, again, very good. It's gonna capitalize on the follow-up attacks. But if you don't have that, there is a free-to-play 5-star option from Simulated Universe called the Cruising in the Stellar Sea, which I use consistently on my Stella. So let's go ahead and talk about this. Increases the wearer's crit rate by 8% and increases the crit rate against enemies with HP less than or equal to 50% of them by an extra 8%. When the wearer defeats the enemy, their attack is increased by 20% for 2 turns, which is, again, a big plus because that's a constant buff so long as you're able to defeat the enemies consistently. Now, a great 4-star option is Only Silence Remains, and I've talked about this one a lot with hunt characters, so let's dive in. Increases the wearer's attack by 16%. If there are 2 or fewer enemies on the field, increase the wearer's crit rate also by 12%. Very solid option, but what if you don't have a 4-star or a 5-star? Well, the 3 stars aren't the best options, and I would honestly recommend going for the free-to-play 5-star, the Cruising of the Stellar Sea. But if you need a 3-star in case, you could use the Darting Arrow. When a wearer defeats an enemy, increases their attack by 24% for 3 turns, which is a consistent one. So there is that. But if you don't want that one, you could always go for, at the start of the battle, the wearer's crit rate increases by 12% for 3 turns with arrows. Now again, this is only for 3 turns, so I wouldn't even recommend this one, so we could just Delito Fujito that one. So I would say, if anything, if you need a 3-star, go for the Darting Arrow, but I highly recommend at least going for the Cruiser of the Stellar Sea if you need that free-to-play option. Now, we talked about light codes, but what about artifacts and how you should build and really kind of allocate your stats? First things first, the first of these relics that I want to talk about is the Wastelander of Banditry Desert. Now, this one's a good option because, again, it capitalizes on the imaginary damage. 2-piece increasing imaginary damage by 10%, and 4-piece when attacking debuffed enemies, the wearer's crit rate is increased by 10% and their crit damage increased by 20% after against imprisoned enemies. So the reason why this is important is that imaginary users can imprison enemies, so that's really good. And if you're able to imprison them, you get a 20% buff to your crit damage. Not only that, but it's capitalizing on the debuffed enemies, which if you're using Dr. Ratio in a team with like Pella or even, you know, like Silverwolf, you're gonna debuff the enemies consistently, so it makes sense to have something like this on him. A good secondary option is actually the Ash Blazing Grand Duke, which increases the damage dealt by follow-up attacks by 20% on the 2-piece, while the 4-piece, when the wearer uses follow-up attacks, increases the wearer's attack by 6% for every time the follow-up attack deals damage. This effect can stack up to 8 times and lasts for 3 turns. This effect can be removed the next time the wearer uses a follow-up attack. Now, of course, also, I've seen people talk about this on multiple characters, but Genius of Brilliant Stars, the 2-piece is quantum damage by 10% or increases quantum damage. Now, of course, he's not a quantum user, so you're not using him for the 2-piece. You're using it for the 4-piece. When the wearer deals damage to the target enemy, ignores 10% damage, and if the target enemy has a quantum weakness, which is a very common weakness on enemies I've noticed, the wearer additionally ignores 10% defense. But I wouldn't use this set personally. Now, of course, I also didn't pull up these the actual artifact sets that I needed to for the actual 2-pieces, so bear with me on that. But there are a couple of sets I did want to talk about, like this one right here, the Ferment Frontline Glamoth. Now, this one's really good because it increases the wearer's attack by 12%, and if your wearer speed is equal to or higher than 135 and 160, the wearer deals 12% or 18% more damage depending on your speed. So you want to capitalize on the speed boost of that. But you could also go with an Old Faithful, in my opinion, and I always call it Old Faithful, and I love it. Space Sealing Station increases the wearer's attack by 12%, and when the wearer's speed reaches 120 or higher, the wearer's attack is increased by an extra 12%. Now, honestly, I would say if you're going for the easy way of building a character, you could go for the Wastelanders of Banditry and a Space Sealing Station, but I would highly recommend actually going for the Ash Blazing Grand Duke with a Glamoth, because I think that might be your best options. Now, let's say you're going for the Ash Blazing Grand Duke. your main focus is going to be crit rate and crit damage on Dr. Ratio, because again, he is a DPS and it makes the most sense. So on your, chess piece, you're going to want to go crit rate or crit damage depending on what's lacking the most. Now, boots is speed, and speed is definitely in there as well. So your main focuses for all stats: crit rate, crit damage, attack percentage, and speed, because you boost on attack. Crit rate and crit damage is needed for DPSs, and you want to have that speed so that you can actually, go fast and attack before anybody else. You can also go for break effect as well if you want to get that extra 4 stat, but so long as you have those first 3, you'll be perfectly fine. So chess piece, crit rate and crit damage depending on what you need the most. For your boots, you're going to need speed as your main stat, because again, you want to make sure to have enough speed. And then if you're going for your 2-piece, your main focuses should be imaginary damage on your orb, and then your chain should be attack percentage to build off more of that attack. So yeah, that's how I would build Dr. Ratio personally. Now, there are some things that you could change around depending on what you're going for. And if you're going to, like, let's say run that, where is it? The relic set of Genius of the Brilliant Stars, you could run him alongside someone like Silverwolf, who could help apply that quantum weakness, I guess, in that regard. But I definitely wouldn't recommend that. But overall, Dr. Ratio has a lot of options in general for how to build him. So let me know in the comments down below how you built your Dr. Ratio, and tell me how he's doing in most of the content. And y'all, that's going to be it for today's video. If you like the content, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe button down below, and hit that notification bell to be notified of when the next Honkai Star Rail build guide comes out. And thank you so much for all the love and support that y'all have been giving me lately. I can't thank you enough for that. So anyways, y'all, that's going to be it. Love you all to death. And as always, we will catch you in the next video. Please take care and be safe.